Now I'd like to introduce Dr. David Kelsey, who is very kindly joining us live from the UK. David is head of the computing group in particle physics at Rutherford Appleton Laboratory, based near Oxford. He is an experimental particle physicist by background and now concentrates on IT and has been working in security, trust and identity for research for more than 20 years. He has held leadership roles in several e-infrastructures, including UK Grid PP, CERN, EGI and EOSC. He was also a founding member of several global activities coordinating security, trust and identity, including IGTF, FIM4R and WISE. He worked on policy activities in the AARC projects from 2015 to 2019 and co-chairs the policy working group for AEGIS. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you, Kerry, for the introduction, and thank you to you and your colleagues for inviting me to speak to you today about AARC and AEGIS. So next slide, please. So this is very much a lightning talk. There's not much time to go into any detail. I just want to cover a number of topics, and then the material will be available for you offline, or we can follow up on things afterwards in Q&A or afterwards. So I will talk about FIM4R, that started first back into 2011, leading to the AARC projects starting in 2015, then talk about AEGIS, and then talk about the future and some conclusions. Many apologies for the super fast view, and thanks to my colleagues for use of their slides. Next slide, please. So this is the Federated Identity Management for Research vision that we stated in paper version number 2, that every researcher is entitled to focus on their work, not to be impeded by obstacles, nor required to understand any of the technical details of the infrastructure, and just let them to get on with their work accessing the research services. And so everything that we've pushed for in FIM4R is on that basis. Next slide. So what is Federated Identity Management for Research? First of all, here are the 2 papers that we published, 2012 and then 2018. The links are there, and there's the group that finalized the draft in 2018 at the TNC conference in Trondheim in Norway that year. Next slide. So the FIM4R communities, we represent volunteer research communities who were willing to join into the exercise. And as you see there's a wide range of arts and humanities, linguistics, bioscience, the physics, astronomy and high energy physics, etc. And if you belong to a research community that's not in there, we didn't exclude you for any reason. It's just that we didn't manage to make contact with you. So anybody who wants to join in, it's an open organization. Please join us and help us develop. We are continuing to meet and developing things for the future. Next slide, please. So, authentication and authorization for research collaboration, AARC, the FIM4R work and other studies in Europe persuaded the European Commission to fund these projects. So we had 2 times 2 years, each with the same set of 25 partners taking forward the ideas that had come out of there and looking at what existing communities were actually doing. And there's a link there to a video which is still available, I believe, and is a good introduction of what AARC is all about. Next slide, please. So one of the fundamental things that we experienced very early on was that the EduGain Global Interfederation for Research and Education, of which the AAF is a member, works very well for many of the services, the SPs in the universities and the identity providers. But for research communities, it was often difficult or impossible because they were not actually legal entities or what have you to sign contracts and join federations. And so they wanted to, many of the research communities decided it was easier to join EduGain through this proxy and identity. So this proxy in the middle here between the browny, orangey, whatever the color is, research project there on the left, it appears to be an IDP that hides all the complexity of the research, of the identity federation behind that. And then to the EduGame world, it appears to be a single service provider and hides the complexity of all the services. And we found this to be an extremely useful architecture. And that's what the AARC blueprint architecture is based on. Next slide, please. So the AARC results coming out of the 4 years of work that we did, we had the technical blueprint architecture showing how to actually use this proxy and join all the various components together, a large number of guidelines and recommendations, and some policy frameworks and the policy development kit to actually allow people to put the policy requirements together to actually join the research community into the global EduGain interfederation. Next slide, please. So AEGIS, the AARC engagement group for infrastructures, was actually started halfway through the AARC projects in 2017 as we realized that we needed something that was sustainable beyond the end of the project, that was actually going to take things forward after AARC had finished, and was going to allow the various infrastructures to work together with their representatives as a communication channel between them and the infrastructure providers, a way of promoting a consistent vision and facilitating future activities so that adoption and implementation of harmonized solutions would actually work. And this has been extremely useful beyond the end of the AARC project. Next slide, please. And so there are two classes of membership in AEGIS. There are the full members and there's a list there of the full members, the current full members. So this is infrastructures and other organizations who are already operating an authentication authorization infrastructure consistent with the AARC blueprint architecture and the guidelines. And they get to vote on the new documents and endorse them, and they agree to actually implement them, and their sort of implementation is tracked by the AEGIS organization. But then there are many observers as well who are interested in following the guidelines and the blueprint architecture or in the process of implementing them. And there's a long list there, but importantly, you'll notice that the Australian Access Federation is one of the observers there. So that's your important route in, you as the research communities in Australia, to actually feed in your requirements, things that don't work, feedback, and let us develop and take things forward. Next slide, please. So another activity that maintained the sustainability of the funding afterwards were the European Union GÉANT projects, GN4 and GN5. And in the trust and identity activities there's a subtask called Enabling Communities, ENCO, where there are funded members of the staff who are able to participate in AEGIS to take forward work, particularly in the areas of trust and policy and documentation and support. And here you see a picture of the blueprint architecture. And again, I don't have time to go through any of the details, but you see the users at the top and the services at the bottom linked together by this proxy. And you notice that one of the services can be a proxy in itself. And we've seen that in a growing number of cases, that the proxies are nested. So one is run by the infrastructure, one run by the community, perhaps run by other entities. Next slide, please. And one of the things that we actually did in GÉANT ENCO was to actually produce this getting started page, and the link, the short URL there, edu.nl, points to that detail, which takes you through and points you at the appropriate guidance and help there. And of course, you will also get good support from the Trust and Identity team in AAF as well, and I'm sure they will be your first point of call, but if you want to know more, there it is. Next slide, please. So what about the future? We've got an AARC 3 project, which we actually called AARC Tree, Technical Revision to Enhance Effectiveness. This was submitted to the European Commission earlier this year, has successfully gone through the review process, and so we are now in contract negotiation with the Commission. But because that negotiation is not completed, I don't list the members or state how much money we're getting or anything, but it is likely to run for 2 years starting early next year. And the objectives there include several things: interoperability requirements, new requirements taking into account what's changed since 2019, new technical and policy guidelines, expanding the number of research communities, aligning strategies, and producing a compendium and recommendations. We need to target small and medium research communities, simplifying the ARC PDK, establishing new trust in interoperability. And here, FIM4R is seen as a continuing important place for research communities to come in. So all of the discussions here, even though the project is closed, all of the discussions will be held in open forum. And I invite you and your colleagues to join in FIM4R, etc., and feed in your experiences of using the ARC blueprint, and where things don't work well, let's try and improve them together. Next slide, please. So this is my summary. This is the end. So the outputs from ARC and ARC2 have been very successfully used in many research infrastructures, enabling more efficient use of IT researchers. The AEGIS has been an important area for maintaining and developing the technical aspects and taking it forward. And if and when, or confidently when, the ARC3 project is finally approved, we will build on this and update all aspects. I said that AAF is an observer in AEGIS. That's an important route in for Australia as a research community. And FIM4R is important, and we will be holding the next one full day meeting in Copenhagen in Denmark at the end of January next year. And so anybody who wants to join there is very welcome to join us. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Kerry. Oh, the next slide, there is a slide here of information. So there's various pointers and things that you can find out more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. That was a really interesting outline of Federation and AEGIS.